Hi, my name is Jane Scarf, and I want to talk to you today about the family and common law and the UN 2030 agenda and what I can see about how these things are related. First of all, I think people can pretty much see the writing on the wall that the agenda as it's being rolled out includes undermining the family unit. And the purpose of that is to have more control over citizens and over, in particular, over children and what happens with children. And this is playing out in various ways. The Education Act, for example, has been recently modified by Bill 197, and it changes Section 188 of the Education Act, which is where it designated parents as the persons responsible to provide the consent for the child to go into school. And of course, once they're in school, consent always rested with the parents for an outing, or they had to consent to emergency medical treatment or anything else that went on in the school. But of course, they don't want to leave that consent there with the parent, because it kind of, dirties the water in terms of them getting their way of ultimate control. So as we can see what's going on with the vaccine, they want to be able to vaccinate every child. So they, in Toronto, set up a clinic and enticed 12-year-olds and over, like, so 12 to 16 should have still been under the supervision of the parents. They enticed them to go to a park, Queen's Park, and have a vaccine so they can get an ice cream and listen to music. That's a pretty scary, turn that we're making. And we have to really look at what is it? What are they doing? What are they trying to do? And we do have ways and means that we can fight this. We have a Canadian Bill of Rights, for example, that provides for voluntary informed consent to any medical procedure. So that would include masks, vaccines, so on. So take a 12-year-old child and not even give them the information. So regardless, it's not informed, because they weren't telling people that this was an untested product, and they weren't telling people the rate of disability and the rate of death that's been ascribed to it. Just whack or jab, I guess that's a good word for it. So there's also the issue of masks in school. Those are also medical procedures, because they're meant to control communicable disease. So again, that should require consent from the parents, and they're kind of just skipping that step. So in order to facilitate their legal authority to skip over there, they've made this change to the Education Act, and they've replaced it with an amendment is made to improve the requirement that directors of education must be supervisory officers that are qualified as teachers. The Act is also amended to provide that if regulations prescribe qualifications for directors, that's not the one I wanted to talk about. I wanted to talk about Section 185 and 188 of the Education Act are amended to allow persons other than parents or guardians of pupils or prescribed persons to be prescribed for the purpose of providing written notice to a board that a pupil or a prescribed person intends to attend a prescribed school under Section 185 or a school of the board under Section 188, as the case may be. Section 185 and 188 are also amended to add regulation-making powers related to prescribing the persons who may provide notice, governing the conditions under which that notice may be provided by such persons, and authorizing the collection of personal information in the process of providing that notice. So, like, who's going to receive this power to provide consent? And don't forget, when the parent has the legal authority for consent, and they provide that consent for the child to go in school, there's a requirement that that consent be exercised with regard to any other activities the child are doing in school. So by circumventing that and giving consent to somebody else or some entity, we don't even know if it's a person or a position or whatever, it's just whoever, they even have the power to just whatever determine who they're going to put this power over to. Anyways, that's pretty scary stuff. And unlike the Canadian Bill of Rights, which holds the family in high esteem, and the tradition of common law has always strived to maintain the integrity and the dignity of the family, and to nth degree, support the rights of the parents with their children and so on. That's like an absolute. It's almost the essence of common law. One of the most important things that's right in their preamble in the first paragraph, the status of the family in a society with free institutions and so on. And it also has the protection for voluntary informed consent for medical, which derives from centuries of common law establishment of this right, including the Nuremberg Principles. It was involved in that because post-Second World War, people everywhere in the world were concerned about the kind of intrusive medical operations were going on, in particular in Germany. So they wanted to establish a standard that the world would follow going forward. So what are we doing here? Going backwards. We're going back, pre World War II to where that kind of intrusion from the state was not clearly delineated as overreach, overstep. So that's another area that we can address with the Canadian Bill of Rights. And ultimately, this agenda that's coming down, there's other really disturbing things that they've done. Like the Criminal Code has a section in the preamble that says Canada is committed to, I think they use it, enforce the UN agenda. And if you read that straight up like that, that's pretty scary. I don't know if people know a lot about it, but there's very, very scary stuff in there. However, you're supposed to read legislation where there's with an implication to any rights. If you use a charter, I'm sure it wouldn't hold up because the charter allows the government to override. But the Bill of Rights does not allow them to override. So when you read that part of the Criminal Code, you have to say Canada is committed to enforcing the UN agenda so long as it doesn't, like the implication by the Canadian Bill of Rights, as long as it doesn't override our rights. So as far as far as they want to, but not infringing on our rights. Now the other thing that they've brought in is this what's it called, Unrip, which is their I believe it's their method to acquire land. Like it says in there that they're declaring that it's terrorism to put forward a concept that there was no land ownership in Canada before the Europeans came. You cannot express that assertion. Otherwise, they're taking that as terrorism. So then, further to that, they're saying that they want to ascribe land ownership to the status. So First Nations persons with status, and the problem with that is if they designate basically the whole of Canada back to persons with status, then that means that the government is in control of that land still, because that's the, you know, that's not going to help anybody. That's not going to help First Nations either. They need to get control of the land that they already have, and maybe other land given to them for various situations where their land rights were disregarded, disrespected, things like that. I have no problem with trying to resolve things like that, but have the UN come in and say, oh, basically, as I read it, all land will go back, and that's pretty scary. So I guess the concept will be we can use the land as insofar as I don't even want to talk about that, but there's they've made it very clear that they have this concept of sustainability, and the population of the world has to be reduced by 90% in order to sustain, to be sustainable, for the world to be sustainable. So that, I won't even talk about that. That's for another day, but that's a scary thing too. So I know this is very bad news that I'm telling you, and very insidious stuff that's seeping in. But if we keep our eye on the ball, and you know, see clearly that we do have well articulated rights that protect us from this, and there's another issue that I want to raise today, and that is over the years, we're a common law country, and a common law country is supposed to be basing its court decisions on jury decisions, and they've kind of shoved juries off to the side. And with the charter, they even state that you cannot have a jury unless the Crown is seeking to put you in jail for more than 5 years. Well, that's crap. Like, what about our rights? What about where there's a conflict between the government and the people with regard to their rights? That's very serious. And there is case law that says that we're entitled to a jury if it's a serious case. So if it is a serious case, for example, what's going on, or what went on in Toronto for about a month, there was very vicious arrests and charges, just completely disregarding their protest rights, the right to speech, all that. And by the way, I don't think that was Toronto police. I think it was off-duty police officers working as private security. So, in other words, it was a PSYOP. And beyond that, I believe that the police do have our back. They have refused to, 44 out of 44 police services refused straight up publicly to enforce the stay-at-home orders. And that would have involved stopping you walking up the road or driving, and demanding your ID, demanding to know where you're going, and to refuse your passage if you're not going somewhere they consider to be essential, and even fining you if they choose to. So they didn't do that, and they haven't been smashing into our homes either and removing everybody if there's more than 5 people, all that kind of stuff. They didn't do that at all. There's been some to-do around the businesses, but only one where they smashed in with no legal basis, and that was Skelly's. And again, that wasn't Toronto Police. That was John Tory hiring off-duty police officers as private security, and then they got Dr. Davila to make a claim that she's going to occupy the property, and that's totally illegal. It's not even legal under these bizarre COVID bylaws. It's even beyond that. And the police were entitled under these BS COVID bylaws to do that, but they didn't do it. They haven't been doing it. So they've refused since the beginning. They didn't publicly state it until the stay at home, and then they came out and they were not enforcing them because they're not legal. So we've got that in our corner, and also we have no action against the public or against people by the military either. And I believe they're standing on the Canadian Bill of Rights, because they would not be allowed to rely on the Charter, because Section 1 of the Charter says the government is allowed to override your rights. and you have to go to court to get your rights back. But in the meantime, if the police were just using the charter, they would have to enforce these bylaws. And I think that's what the plan was. But a lot of people have woken up to the Canadian Bill of Rights, and they're using it in various ways and having various levels of they haven't been defeated even once using it. Either charges are dropped or they're delaying and they're trying to make deals and stuff like that. But it's a very powerful piece of legislation. It doesn't give the government any room to override. So we're looking good there. And the overall agenda, what I think has to happen is we have to get our juries back in there. I believe that we have a legal right to have a jury because we're a common law country, and all our prerequisite laws support that. They've been just jammed off to the side, the juries have, because to give more power to the state. And one reason, or one argument that we're going to use also in favor of bringing these juries back, especially where it regards rights, is because the judge is biased because they're employees of the government. So if you have a conflict with the government with regard to your rights, you don't go to the government to solve the conflict. That's a fundamental violation. Also under, I think it's 2E of the Bill of Rights, which entitles you to a jury, or not a jury, I mean adjudication from an unbiased source, and no judge can be considered to be unbiased because they're all appointed and paid for by the government. And they could play a role in there, to inform the jury and things like that, and to, sort of an administrative role, but they shouldn't be giving their opinion on it, and there shouldn't be any weight to their in the final decision. There shouldn't be any weight on the judge's position, or they shouldn't put a position. So that's where we're going. We're developing. It's almost ready. A declaration that we're going to get signed en masse to say we want those juries put back there. It's not a petition because we're not begging. We're not asking. We're telling them we have that right. Do it. And if we can get a large enough voice, I think we'll get it, because they won't legally or morally be able to deny it. We have the legal right based on common law, and we have the conflict of interest issue. So any one of those would be enough, but we have two, and we have a need. We have a crisis going on here. We need to get back to our basic method of establishing law, which is common law. We never switched over to there's a lot of corruption and crap going on, and Trudeau Senior whacked out a few laws that follow the charter. For example, it follows the structure of maritime law, where the person is not a human anymore. They are an entity, like a corporation, and they're defined like that, and they're treated like that under there. The language is very clearly showing you that in the charter. It says guarantee rights and freedoms unless the government has demonstrably justified reason to override your rights. So basically willy-nilly, like these bylaws. They just get the concept that they want to override, wham bam. And then it's up to us to go to the court and convince the court who work for them to give us back our rights. No, thank you. Keep your charter. Thank you. I'll use the Canadian Bill of Rights. It doesn't have any such nonsense in there, and it does say in there that our rights cannot be violated except by due process of law, and that means by common law. It's the same thing. So they can't just whack out these bylaws and expect to have martial law and force vaccine and force PCR and sorry, my phone was ringing. So anyways, watch out for the declaration. It'll be coming out, I believe, by the 24th of July, and we need to get as many signatures as possible. So we'll have many different venues for putting out the statement, and they will be applied to a court case that's coming up on January 31st with Dave Freedom. It'll be Regina versus Freedom, and we'll be backing him to say that he needs his jury, because we need the jury back. We all do. Like what's going on in his case, all of his rights were violated at Queen's Park because he was protesting contrary to the bylaws. Okay, well, that doesn't hold up legally, and this is what he's on about. But he doesn't want a judge deciding whether the government can override his rights or not. He wants a jury deciding that, and we all should want that, because his rights are our rights. If they can take his away, they can take ours away, and they do. They've taken the rights away from many people in many situations. So we can do this. We have the law on our side, and we have a lot of behind the scene support, like the police not enforcing, the military not enforcing, and there's other officials and there's other people that might be afraid to come out and tell you, like they're fighting this, because they'll just get whacked, they'll get fired or whatever, or worse. But they're there, and they will play their part, and they are playing their part, and we're going to win this. This Bill of Rights, when it was put in 1960 by John Diefenbaker, it was promoted as a piece of necessary legislation to prevent communism from coming into Canada. And I truly believe that it can, and it is actually. It's slowing things down quite a bit. We're nowhere near where they expected us to be by now. Like they're slowed down, and they're all, like they're all over the place. As a matter of fact, in Ontario, it's very weird. The emergency is over, but yet they're still trying to pretend they have emergency measures in place. Well, that's not legal, and that's going to come out in the wash too, because anybody charged now, it's not going to stick. So I think we're not out of the woods yet, but we have lots of people, lots of players on this, and we have the law on our side, very clearly on our side, and we just have to know it and assert it. And that's what we're doing in as many situations as we can. There's dozens of people using the Bill of Rights for fines, for charges, for business closures, all of that stuff. And so far, so good. So let's keep going. And if anybody wants any more information, or if they want to give me their email so I can email them the declaration for the jury, my email address is mjslegalservices@yahoo.com. So, all done for now.